Hello, my name is Eve. I'm a 3D artist and illustrator. Today I'll be showing you how to make this room in Blender from start to finish. This series will be split into multiple parts and we'll cover how you can model all the elements in this scene, how to apply materials, how to do UVs and textures, and finally how to light the scene. Before we start modeling, you need to turn on a few add-ons that are off by default in Blender. Go to Edit, Preferences, and go into Key Map. Here you need to turn on Tab for Pie menu, as well as extra shading pie menu items. Then in the Input tab, turn on Emulate 3-button mouse. And finally, in Add-ons, turn on Add Mesh, Extra Objects, as well as Mesh, Loop Tools. These are going to make your workflow much easier and faster. After that, click here and Save Preferences. Let me just very quickly run you through some Blender navigation basics in case you're a complete beginner. If you're not, feel free to skip this part. To rotate around the object, you use the middle mouse button. If you press Shift middle mouse button, you can pan around your scene. You zoom in and out with the wheel on your mouse. To edit a mesh, you press Tab and go into Edit mode. Here you can press 1 for vertice selection, 2 for edge selection, or 3 for face selection. You can move these vertices, faces, and edges by pressing G. To scale something in your scene, you press S. To rotate, you press R. Then to exit edit mode, you press Tab and you go back into object mode. This is just super quick navigation basics, and I'll also leave a little cheat sheet of all the shortcuts I'll be using in the description below. Okay, let's get started. First, we need to import a reference image. Press Shift A and then select Image, Reference. Find your reference image, unclick Align to View here, and then load the reference image. Now you want to rotate it. Press R to rotate and then X to constrain the rotation only to the X-axis. Type in 90 on your keyboard to rotate the image 90 degrees. Then press G to move the image to the side like this. You want it out of the way of the model, but close enough so you can refer to it while modeling. Okay, let's start on the room now. We'll make the walls first. We'll use this default cube that we have in our scene. Select the cube and then press Tab to go into edit mode. Press 3 for face selection. Select these 3 faces by clicking on them while holding down Shift. Press X and choose faces to delete the faces. Then press Tab and go back into object mode. Now we're going to apply a modifier to give the wall some thickness. Press on the little wrench tool here and go into modifiers. Add the solidify modifier. In thickness, add 0.15 meters. You also want to turn on even thickness from the modifier settings here to make sure that the edges are straight and have even thickness. You can see the difference with it disabled and enabled here. Now click the check mark next to the modifier and apply it. Next, let's add a bevel modifier. From the drop-down menu, choose bevel. As a rule, when you're modeling hard surface objects, you want to add bevels to sharp corners. This is because nothing in the real world has perfectly hard edges, and it just adds a bit of realism to your work. I set the amount of the bevel modifier to 0.006. Okay, now let's start making the bed. First, we'll make the mattress. For that, we'll insert another cube. Press Shift A and choose Mesh, Cube. To scale down your cube, press S. To move it, press G. We want to position it roughly where the bed is in the reference. Press S and Y to scale the cube only in the Y-axis and make it longer. Press S and X to make the cube wider in the X-axis. And finally, pressing S and Z lets you make the bed less thick. If you press numpad 1, you go into front view. Here you can position the mattress to better match the reference. Press G to move the mesh around. Now we want to add bed covers. To do that, press Tab and go into edit mode. Press Ctrl R to enter the loop cut tool. Add a loop here and double click to accept it. Now let's make a separate mesh out of the top faces for the bed cover. Press 3 for face selection mode. Click on each face while holding down Shift to select them all. Then press Shift D to duplicate them. Click to accept the duplicated faces. After that, press P and choose Selection. This separates the faces we just selected into their own object. As you can see, now we have one object for the mattress and one for the bed covers. Let's give some thickness to the bed covers now. You can do that by extruding the faces, or again, like we did before, applying a solidify modifier. I'll show you how to do it the extrude way just so you can see both ways. Okay, so press Tab and go into edit mode. Select all of the faces by pressing A. Then right click and choose extrude along normals. Drag your mouse out a bit and then click to accept the extrusion. Now from the tool settings down here, you want to click on offset even. Then we'll also drag out the top edges on the bed cover to make sure that it's even thickness throughout. Press 2 to enter edge selection mode. Click and hold down Shift to select these two edges. Press G and then Z to move up the edges in the Z axis. Okay, now let's bevel the mattress and the bed cover. Before we do that though, we want to apply all transforms. To do that, select the object, press Ctrl A and choose all transforms. What that does, it removes any location and scale values from your objects. Now when you apply the bevel modifier, it will apply properly without any issues. We'll do the same for the bed cover mesh. Select the object, press Ctrl A and choose all transforms. Now let's add a bevel modifier to the mattress. Go into modifiers and choose bevel. Add 2 segments and a bevel amount of around 0.005. That makes the mattress nice and rounded like in the reference. Now to smooth the appearance of the mattress, right click and choose Shade Smooth. From modifiers, I also add a subdivision surface modifier to the mesh without applying it to further smooth it in the viewport. Now let's bevel the bed covers. For this, we just want to select the corner edges as we want the bottom to remain completely straight. Select the bed covers, press Tab and go into edit mode. Press 2 for edge selection. Click and shift select these edges. Then press Ctrl B to bevel them. If you scroll on the mouse, you can increase the segments on the bevel. I do 2 bevel segments on the bed covers. Now to smooth the covers, right click and select Shade Smooth. As you can see, the mesh shading looks weird. We fix that by fixing the normals. Go into Object Data Properties here and then go into Normals. Check Auto Smooth and set the angle of 60 degrees. Now your normals look good. Now let's do the bottom baseboard and then the headboard. Press Shift A and add another cube. Press S to scale it down. Press G to move it to the bottom of the bed here. Press S and Y to slim down the cube, and then S and Z to make it into a rectangular shape. Position it at the same height as it is in the reference by pressing G. Scale it down until it looks like a thin rectangular shape. Here I'm shift selecting the mattress and bed covers and using G and Y to move all the objects a bit closer to the wall. I'm also moving the mattress and bed covers a bit lower by pressing G and Z. Once the bed frame is the right size, let's duplicate it by pressing Shift D. Then press X to move it in the X-axis. Now let's scale it to make the side post. Press S and X to scale it down. Press G and X to move it to the end here. Then press S and Y to make it nice and square. And finally S and Z to make it longer and make it reach the ground. Here I'm moving it a bit forward so it doesn't clip the bed. Now let's bevel the top. Press Tab and go into edit mode. Press free for face selection and select this face here. Press Ctrl B for bevel. You can add as many segments as you want by scrolling with the mouse. I add 3 segments. Now press 2 for edge selection and select these edges here by clicking on them and holding down Shift. We'll bevel those as well. With the edges selected, press Ctrl B for bevel. Now let's smooth our mesh. Press Tab and go into Object mode. Right click and choose Shade Smooth. As you can see, the normals don't look right. Before we fix those like we did earlier, we need to mark which edges we want to remain sharp. To do that, press Tab and go back into Edit mode. Select these edges by clicking on them while holding down Shift. Then right click and choose Mark Sharp. What that will do is once we set the angle of the normals, it will tell Blender that we want these edges to remain sharp. Press Tab and go back into Object mode. Then from Object Data Properties, go into Normals and click on Auto Smooth. Set the angle to 60. As you can see, the edges we marked as sharp remained sharp and didn't get smoothed out, so it's all good now. Now let's duplicate this post. Select it and press Shift D to duplicate it. Press X after to move it to the other side. Here I'm just duplicating the baseboard and putting it under the mattress. It will be the part that is supporting the mattress and keeping it up. I'm just scaling it up to the shape of the bottom of the mattress. After I'm done with the scale of the object, I go back into Object mode. I press Ctrl A and choose All Transforms to apply all transforms. Go into Modifiers and add the Bevel modifier. I set it to around 0.008. I right click and choose Shade Smooth, and then I also turn on Auto Smooth from Normals with an angle of 60. Now let's duplicate this frame at the end of the bed to use it for the top end of the bed. In Object mode, select the 3 meshes we just made by holding down Shift. Then press Shift D to duplicate them and Y to move them in the Y-axis. Place them at the top of the bed here. We just want to move these a bit higher to match the reference better. Press G and Z to move the objects up. Now let's adjust them. Press Numpad 1 to go into Front View. With all of the objects selected, press Tab and go into Edit mode. Press 1 for vertice selection. Turn on X-ray mode from up here, or this button here, to be able to select the vertices at the front of the model as well as the ones at the back. Select the bottom vertices of the 3 meshes. Now press S, Z, and 0 to flatten those vertices in the Z-axis. Then press G and Z to move the vertices all the way to the floor. Here I'm just moving everything a bit further away from the wall. I'm also moving the board at the bottom of the mattress a bit further down. While you're doing this step, make sure you view the bed from all angles to make sure that there's no clipping or gaps. Once I'm done with this, I turn off X-ray mode. Next, let's add the pillows. Press Shift A and add another cube. Scale it down by pressing S and move it with G. Scale it up in the X-axis by pressing S and X to make it rectangular. Scale it up in the Z-axis as well by pressing S and Z. Rotate the cube by pressing R. I rotate and position the cube so it isn't clipping with the bed too much. Now press Ctrl A and apply all transforms. Now we're ready to add a modifier to the pillow. I add a bevel modifier with 3 segments. Then I right click and choose Shade Smooth. For the other pillow, we're going to add a round cube and flatten that down. Press Shift A and add another round cube. Click down here on this little menu in the left and set the radius of the round cube to 1. Right click it and choose Shade Smooth. Scale it down in the Z axis to flatten it by pressing S and Z. Then press S to scale it further and G to position it on the bed like it is in the reference. Press R to rotate it so it's laying on the other pillow without clipping. After it's positioned, press Shift D to duplicate it. Then use G to position the duplicated mesh in the middle where the button is on the reference. On the big pillow, I also add a subdivision surface modifier without applying it to smooth out the mesh a bit in the viewport. And now the bed is all done. Before we continue, I want to give the biggest shout out to my patrons. Thank you so much for supporting me and my work. It really means the world to me. Thanks to you, I can continue to grow this channel and continue making more videos for you guys. If you find my tutorials useful and are able to, please consider supporting me on Patreon. The link is in the description. And now back to the video. Next, we'll start making the bookshelf. Press Shift A and add a cube. Scale it down by pressing S. Position it using G. Press numpad 3 for side view. Here I'm just pressing Tab and going into edit mode to make the bookshelf the correct side. I press 1 for vertice selection and move the selected vertices with G. Generally you can edit objects either in edit mode like I am doing now or in object mode like we did with the bed before. I just wanted to show you both ways. It doesn't really matter how you do it, but I find that edit mode is faster and easier to use. Now we want to do the individual cubbies of the bookshelf. To do that, we need to add some more edge loops around this cube. Press Ctrl R to add edge loops. Scroll on your mouse until you have 3 new loops. Double click to accept them. Now we're going to select the front 3 faces here and insert those in. Select all the faces by holding down Shift, then press I for Insert. As you can see, this tool takes the currently selected faces and creates an insert of them. Before clicking to accept this, press I again, and now the insertion happens to each individual face. Adjust the thickness and then click to accept the insertion. We will now use these 3 inner faces to make the individual shelves. Press E to extrude. Extrude the faces in the X-axis. Nice, now the shelves are done. Let's do the bottom area of the bookcase. Press K to activate the knife tool. We want to cut this big face on the bottom here in half. While holding down Shift, click in the middle of the face here. Then while holding down Shift still, make a cut on the top of the face as well. Press Enter to accept the cut. With the 2 faces selected, press I twice to create inserts of the faces. Click to accept the inserts. Then press E to extrude. Extrude the 2 faces out in the X-axis. Now our bookshelf is almost done. We just want to add 2 spheres for the handles. Press Ctrl A to add a sphere. In the Add Sphere settings here, change the rings from 16 to 8 to make the sphere a bit more low poly. Then right click and choose Shade Smooth. Press S to scale the sphere and G to position it on the bookshelf doors. After you're happy with the position, press Shift D and Y to duplicate the mesh and move it in the Y axis. Nice! Now our bookshelf is all done. Next, let's make a closed book. Press Shift A and add a cylinder. In the Add Cylinder settings, from Cap Fill Type, choose None. That removes the cap on the top and the bottom of the cylinder. Rotate the cylinder on the x-axis by pressing R, X, and typing in 90. Scale the cylinder down by pressing S. Then we're going to hide everything else in the scene so we can just focus on this one object. Press Shift H to hide everything apart from the cylinder. Press numpad 1 for front view. With the object selected, press Tab and go into edit mode. Press 1 for vertice selection. Turn on X-ray mode from up here. Select 1/2 of the cylinder vertices like this. Press X and choose vertices to delete the vertices. After that, select the 2 vertices on the top and the bottom here and press G and X to move them out in the X-axis. After that, you want to select these vertices here and move them out in the Y-axis. Press G and Y to move them and elongate this mesh. After this, press 2 to go into edge selection mode. Select this edge and then shift select this other edge. Press F to create a face between them. After that, double click to select all these edges around here and then again press F to make another face. Do the same on the opposite side. Double click to select all the edges and press F to make a face. Now we want to extrude in to make pages. Press 3 for face selection. Select the inner faces of the book we just created by clicking on them while holding down Shift. Press I to make inserts of the faces. Click to accept the insert. After that, with the internal faces still selected, press E to extrude. Don't move the mouse and just click to accept the extrusion. Then press Alt S to scale the new extruded faces along the normals. Click to accept the scaling. Nice, now our book model is all done. All we need to do is just fix the normals. Press Tab and go back into object mode. Then go into Object Data Properties, Normals, and turn on Auto Smooth. Leave the angle to 30 degrees. Now let's unhide all the other objects in the scene. Press Alt H to unhide everything. Let's scale and position this book and then duplicate it around the scene. Press S to scale the book and press G to move it around. Press R to rotate it around like in the reference. Carefully position it so it isn't clipping with the bookshelf. After you're happy with the position of the book, it's time to duplicate it. Select the book and press Shift D to duplicate it and then Y to move it to the side. Then duplicate it one more time. Press Shift D to duplicate and Y to move it to the side. And one more time, you know the drill, Shift D to duplicate and Y to move it to the side. To make duplicating faster, click and hold down Shift to select all of these books. Then press Shift D to duplicate them all. Now we want to select 6 books from the top shelf and duplicate those to put them on the bottom shelf. Select the books while holding down Shift and press Shift D and Z to duplicate them and move them in the Z axis. Then press G and Y to move them in the Y axis as well. After this, I'm pressing R to rotate this end book here like in the reference, followed by G to fix the position. Next, let's scale the books in the Y-axis to make sure that they all have a different thickness. Having them be different sizes gives some visual interest. I'm pressing S and Y to scale some of the books down, and then I'm moving them back into place with G and Y. I'm also doing that for the top shelf books. Next we want to get 3 more duplicates of a book for the up top shelf. Select one of the books and press Shift D to duplicate it, G to move it, and R to rotate it like in the reference. Position it on the top shelf. Once you're happy with it, press Shift D again to make another copy, G to move the second book, and R to rotate it. Do the exact same for the third book. For the books on the floor, I duplicate 2 from the top shelf. Then I press G to move them and R to rotate them like in the reference. Next we're going to make the potion bottles. We'll only make one model and then duplicate and modify it to add variety to the shapes. Let's start on the potion bottle now. Press Shift A and add a cylinder. I set the vertices of the cylinder to 16. Then scale the cylinder down by pressing S. Now press Shift H to hide everything but the cylinder. Press Tab and go into edit mode. Press Ctrl R to add edge loops. Scroll on the mouse and add 2 new edge loops. Now press 2 for edge selection and select the bottom edge loop. Scale it up by pressing S. Press numpad 1 to go into front view. Then also turn on X-ray mode. Press 1 for vertice selection and then select these top vertices. Scale them in by pressing S and move them in the Z axis by pressing G and Z. Then select the ones at the very top and move them with G and Z again. This elongates the neck of the bottle. Then grab the top and the bottom vertices on the neck and move those upwards with G and Z again. After that, press Ctrl R to add a new edge loop to the neck of the bottle here. Click to accept the edge loop. Press 3 for face selection and with X-ray mode still turned on, select these top faces. After that, right click and choose Extrude Faces along normals. In the extrude settings here, make sure that offset even is enabled. That makes the extrusion have a nice even thickness. Now press 2 for edge selection. Select this edge in the middle here. Let's bevel this. Press Ctrl B to bevel. Scroll on the mouse to add an extra edge loop and then click to accept the bevel. Here I'm just further tweaking the shape of the bottle. Next, let's bevel all the hard edges. Select this edge on the cap here, then shift select this one on the bottom of the cap, as well as the one on the bottom of the bottle. Press Ctrl B for bevel. Scroll down on the mouse to remove the extra edge loop. Now our base bottle is done. Press Tab and go back into object mode. Right click and choose Shade Smooth to smooth out the normals. In Object Data Properties, Normals, set the normals to auto smooth with an angle of 60 degrees. That fixed the bad normals. I also add a subdivision surface modifier without applying it to smooth out the mesh in the viewport. Here I'm just adding some extra edges around the cap and the neck of the bottle to harden the transition of those areas. Now let's duplicate this bottle around the scene and modify it so we can add some variation. Press Alt H to unhide all the other objects in the scene. Press S and G to scale and position the bottle. Put the bottle on the shelf somewhere around here. Here I'm just adjusting the shape further. I'm also turning on X-ray mode again. Once you're happy with the bottle, press Shift D to duplicate it and Y to move it in the Y-axis. Then press Tab and go into edit mode. With X-ray mode still turned on, grab the top vertices of the bottle here. Move them in the Z-axis with G and Z. Now you have a different shaped bottle. Nice! Duplicate that bottle again by pressing Shift and D. Adjust the height of the bottle by pressing Tab and going into edit mode. Move the top down with G and Z. Now you have 3 bottles with different heights. Let's make another copy. Press Shift D to duplicate one of these bottles. Then press S to scale up the duplicated bottle. And let's make yet another copy of the bottle. Press Shift D to duplicate, then again press S to scale the bottle. This time we'll scale this one down to make it much smaller than the others. With the bottle selected, press Tab and go into edit mode. Select the top vertices here and move them all the way down with G and Z. This little bottle won't have any neck and will be a bit more rounded. Adjust the edge loops to be a bit more rounded by scaling them up and down like this. I continue to adjust the bottle shapes by scaling parts of them up and down in edit mode. I've sped this part up as I'm essentially doing the exact same thing that we did up until now. Feel free to slow the video down to see exactly what I'm doing. Making easy changes to the silhouettes of objects like this is a really easy way to add some variation to your scenes. Here I'm just adjusting the height of the books. I'm scaling them in the Z-axis so they're not as long. This way you can see the pages even from a high up angle. I scale the books by pressing S and Z and then I position them back properly on the shelves with G. And now, last but not least, let's make the table. Press Shift A to add a cube. Scale the cube down with S and then scale it in the X, Y, and Z axis to get a rectangular shape. Then position the cube where the table is on the reference with G. Next, let's add another cube for the table leg. Press Shift A and add another cube. Scale it down with S. Then scale it up in the Z axis by pressing S and Z. Position the cube under the table with G. Press numpad 1 to go into front view. Then press Tab and go into edit mode. Now you can quickly adjust the shape of the mesh. Select the bottom vertices here and scale them down with S. Then select the top vertices here and scale them up with S again. We're making the shape nice and tapered on the bottom. Here I'm pressing A to select all the faces and further adjusting the position of the leg with G and X and G and Y. Now we want to bevel these two cubes. First we need to apply all transforms like we did before. Select the objects, press Ctrl A and choose all transforms. Now for modifiers, add the bevel modifier. I set the amount to 0.005 and the segments to 2. Do the same for the table leg. Apply the bevel modifier from modifiers. Set the amount to 0.005 and the segments to 2. Now we can duplicate the table leg. Select it and press Shift D to duplicate. Press X to move the duplicated object in the X-axis. Click to accept the duplication now. After that, select both front legs. Press Shift D again to duplicate those as well. Press Y to move the new duplicates to the back of the table. And now your table has 4 legs. Nice! And that is it for part 1 of this tutorial. In the next part, I'll show you how to model the chair, cauldron, window, extra assets on the desk, as well as the shelves. Again, I really want to thank all my patrons. You guys are the best. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I post exclusive tutorials and tutorial articles on there, as well as development content of my animation project, The Magical Adventures of Gizmo and Oz. With your support, I can grow this channel and make more videos for you guys. Even if you can't join, I really appreciate your constant support. You watching and commenting on this video really means a lot to me. I hope you found part 1 of this tutorial useful and learned something new. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below so we can feed the YouTube algorithm gods. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!